we got caught out with the birth rate. We did. Nothing to do but be honest about that. We had had 10 years of falling birth rates, and it had gone down gradually year on year on year. We were taking out school places, we were closing schools. It went down and down and down, and then it started to recover. But it didn't recover at the rate it went down. In 2 years, it went back to that 10-year high, which was the highest it had ever been, and continued at that rate. So we ended up with a situation whereby, having gone from lots of years of removing school places, very quickly we had to change our policies. Now, normally, when it's births, we get 3 years' notice of them starting school, because they're born, 12 months of collecting that data, and then that makes them 1-year-olds. So you've got 2, 3, 4, and they're starting school. So you've got 3 years' notice that a big blip in numbers is on the way. The problem was that wasn't the only story. We also suddenly had huge inward migration. We had lots of families turning up who didn't give birth in this area. So suddenly we didn't have 3 years warning. We just had children arriving that day with families and saying, I've got 3 children, they need a place. We've also got another issue about the redevelopment of properties. Christchurch historically has had quite an elderly population, and when those houses come back on the market again, instead of being sold on as a single property, they're often redeveloped. And therefore, a house that wasn't producing any children and hadn't produced any children for 40, 50 years, suddenly was not just producing one family, but could be producing 2 or 3 families. So the number of children just literally went through the roof with very short notice. It normally takes us 5 years to build a school. So we went from a situation of removing schools and having a plan to do that to suddenly a great shortage of places. The local plan we had long discussions about, and you've seen where the housing is due to go in. We were offered a school site in that position on the Roshot development, but actually the problem is that isn't where we need school places. You'll recognise this as a map of Christchurch. We have schools in this cluster over by Roshot. We didn't need a school site in Roshot. This is Christchurch Infant and Junior, and the circle around it was 2 years ago where we had to draw the line to say if you live further than this, unless you've already got a brother or sister in the school, you won't get a place. Over the last 2 years, that circle has been getting smaller. So we ended up with the whole of the Jumpers Column, Fairmile, St Catherine's Hill were the ones who weren't getting the places. Who is it most difficult to get to one of the other schools? The people up here, because the options are there's places over here or over here, and we all know to get from there round to Somerford or round to Burton, I know what the roads are like around Christchurch. It's not an option, and they were driving past. They would have been driving past several other schools in order to get a school place, which didn't seem very right. So we spoke with the Christchurch district councillors. We said we had an issue. We said that the offer of a site at Roshot was very kind, but actually the wrong place for Dorset County Council to build a school. We knew where we wanted it. And we were told that once upon a time, Marsh Lane had been in a local plan many, many years ago as a school site. So we went and investigated this and said, right, well, let's go and look at it. If it once was identified as somewhere suitable for a school, perhaps it still is. It was originally in the plan put down as housing, and we didn't believe it was going to be available. But once that plan for that to be housing was dropped, we realised there could be an opportunity to re-establish it as a school site. School sites are quite big. They're about 5 to 8 football pitches was the size we were looking for, which, if you split it up into house plots, not all the roads and green spaces around the houses, but just house plots, is about 60 to 90 house plots. So you're looking for a very, very big site. We couldn't find one in this area. The only site we could find was the Marsh Lane one, and that was, ironically, because it had been left that large, because it had been put aside as a school site. That's why it was the right size. As I said, there were enough places for children in Christchurch. We never had the situation where we couldn't offer places to children. What we couldn't do was offer them a local school. And parents asked us to come out. In fact, 2 years ago, I was standing in this very hall talking with the parents and said, you know, we really want to have a community, and we can't have a community without a school. We can't have these children, very young 4-year-olds, being bussed around to Burton or bussed around to Somerford. It will break down the community. You can't see the parents at the school gate. You can't build that whole sense of community that a school brings. And we agreed with them. County Council said, do you know, we're not actually satisfied with this as a response either, but it takes us 5 years normally to build a school. You're asking us, can we get a school for your children in 2 years' time? It's impossible. And that was really where we were. But we did a leap of faith. We said to the audience here that night that we would look to put something in place as a temporary arrangement and look for a permanent arrangement if they would back us by cooperating. And we couldn't guarantee we could do it, but we agreed with them it was worth a try. And that's exactly what happened. And we have the temporary solution at Christchurch Infants, where there are presently 2 mobile classrooms and children there. We have now outgrown Christchurch Infants, and we've been under conversations with Twynham, who've offered to help us out. So again, it will still be a temporary site, but we're moving the children onto the Twynham site, so they will have all of their facilities and they will carry on. It hasn't yet officially become a new school, because it isn't. We can't call it a new school until we definitely have a site and we can start building it. But it has been a partnership between Dorset County Council saying we agree with those parents, and the parents saying we will trust you, Dorset County Council, that if we both work together we can make this happen. And that's exactly what we're doing. So now we're looking at Marsh Lane as the only site that is large enough to host a school. Discussions with Sembcorp, it was all back to front. Normally we have discussions with the land developer, we keep it quiet, we make sure we've got everything sorted out, we don't put it in the public domain. But we had to say we were looking at a site, so we ended up with this strange situation where it became the site that nobody could discuss. But land negotiations are always very, very sensitive things because you've got businesses involved. But they are sensitive, but they are going very well, so we're quite positive about that. We did also ask about other options, because one of the things in Herne Airport is a free school is going out there. So we did say to the parents, would you like us not to build you a school in this area and you go to the free school at Herne? And we got a very, very straightforward no. This is a community. We want a school in our community. We don't want to be walking our 4-year-olds right the way across the busy, I know it's on a bridge, but across the busy dual carriageway right off over to Herne. We want something that's local. We want families to feel part of it. We want it to be in the heart of the community. And so we said, well, if that's what you want, that's what we'd agreed, and that's exactly where we wanted to go. Schools are always emotive things. I get very involved with planning on schools, or I used to in my previous job. It is not a done deal. We have to go for planning permission for a school just like anyone else does. However, there are some differences about schools. Unlike other people, they are allowed to be in the greenbelt. The reason for that is actually, if you look at a school, very little of it is building. Majority of it is playing fields, playgrounds, car parks. It's big open spaces, and schools are actually seen as very good at being minded towards looking after the environment, about protecting diversity. So they are actually seen as not being a negative impact on greenbelt areas. So they are one of the few exceptions to the rule that you can't build in greenbelt. And there is also a presumption in favour of schools, which the government has decreed, because they realise sites large enough to build a school are few and far between. And therefore, if a school is required, it is so important to a community that that should be looked at by the planning officers. So we will have to go for planning permission. We will have to discuss it. We will have to go through all of the planning stages that most people do. We put the boards up, invite people in, get comments, get feedback. The good news is, at the moment, there are lots of cars driving down into Christchurch. We know how busy the road is. Having a school closer by will help to cut some of that traffic because people won't be travelling as far. It's quite a long way down to Christchurch, Infants and back, and that. Or think of all those cars going backwards and forwards.
It still goes along all this road though, doesn't it?
As I said, it won't go as far. But if you could half the distance that those cars are going, that's half the traffic.
Please stop interrupting. You'll get your chance at the end. You'll be able to use the microphone.